Folks, welcome back to another edition of the Play Action Pod. I'm your host, Christian McCullum, and it is NFL Draft Week. So we've got our guest today, Matt O'Leary. Matt is the host of the Just Jets Pod, and he's a writer at OddsChecker. Matt, thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, man, anytime. I'm excited for Draft Week. It's always the best time of year for Jet fans, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow Matt on Twitter, Matt O'Leary NY. And OddsChecker is running a NFL Draft prop contest on Play Action Pools. Completely free to join. $500 in the total prize pool. $350 to the first place winner. So, like I said, completely free to join. You can find the link down below. So it's pretty exciting. And we're just going to kind of go through for the real listeners and the real people that really want to dig in, Matt. We got to give them an edge for this contest. So let's run down the questions with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, number one overall spot. Who's going to get picked number one? There's been some changes here in the odds recently with Trayvon Walker becoming the favorite over Aiden Hutchinson. The options here are Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson, and Ikem Okunmowo. Who do you got, Matt?
You know what? I think that if it were up to me, I would pick Aiden Hutchinson, but I'm not sold that that's what Jacksonville is going to do. Supposedly, Balky really values the arm length on these prospects, and Aiden Hutchinson is only 7th percentile in terms of arm length. So if that's really a factor, I guess it would be surprising to see them go that direction. I think where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's been a ton of smoke with Trayvon Walker going number one overall. I personally wouldn't make that selection, but it really feels like that's the way that Jacksonville's leaning right now.
Okay, and this is obviously correlated with the next question is number two. I mean, if you think Walker's going to go number one, do you just pick Hutchinson for two?
Yeah, totally. I think they're interchangeable. So whatever you're feeling, I think those are going to be number one and number two in the draft. And for Detroit, I mean, it just makes so much sense. Aiden Hutchinson played at Michigan. It's a local kid. They need a face of that franchise going forward. They need help on the defensive side of the football. I think that'd be a no-brainer selection.
All right, and then we get to who will be drafted first, Evan Neal or Ekwonu? Who you got there?
That's a really tough question. I think if you asked me that at the end of the college football season, I probably would have leaned Evan Neal, but I think Ekwonu's tested really well, and I think teams are going to like his versatility. He's really good as a run blocker, and he could play on the left side or the right side, and he even has experience at guard. So if you really wanted to, you could play him inside. But I think Ekwonu is going to be the first one to come off the board between those two. But someone's going to be happy with getting Evan Neal a little bit later.
Okay. And we get down to some quarterback props. We have Kenny Pickett, his draft position over under 7.5. And Malik Willis, his draft position over under 11.5. I think this is kind of interesting how it goes, both ways where, I think a lot of people have Willis going first, more likely to go first, but Pickett more likely to go to the Panthers. How do you see these two?
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards the under on both of these guys. So let me explain. With Kenny Pickett, I don't have him as my quarterback one, but again, with the smoke and there's fire saying, it feels like Carolina, if they were to go quarterback, I think they would take Kenny Pickett over Malik Willis because I think they need someone who can play right away. Malik Willis is probably better suited to sit initially behind a veteran quarterback. That's why I kind of feel like Pittsburgh's a really good team for him. Obviously, they're picking 20th, but I think they would be aggressive and trade up to get him. We saw a couple of years ago they traded up for Devin Bush, a linebacker. I think if they have an opportunity to trade up for a potential franchise quarterback, that they wouldn't be afraid to do that. So I think we see Kenny Pickett end up going 6th to the Carolina Panthers, and then I'm looking at teams like Atlanta or even the Jets who can move out of their pick. I pick number 8 and pick number 10 to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers who want to get up and get aggressive for Malik Willis. So I think I'm leaning under on both of these guys.
Okay. Kind of leads us into the next. You kind of alluded to it. Will a team, a top 10 pick, be traded in the NFL draft? Sounds like you think yes.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think this draft class, while a lot of people have said that it's a bad draft class, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's not really the best quarterback class, but I think there's good depth in this class. So I think we'll see teams who are in the top 10 look to move out. And even if it's not like the Pittsburgh Steelers coming up to get a franchise quarterback, you just have teams with multiple picks early on. Both the Jets and the Giants have 2 picks in the top 10, so maybe they'd be willing to move back and get even more capital. Atlanta seems like a team who could potentially be on the move at pick number 8, so I think it's a pretty good bet if you could find a trade partner, that is, to get out of your top 10 pick.
Okay. Which receiver will be picked first? We have Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Drake London, or other.
Yeah, this is a really tough question. If you asked me before he got hurt, I would have said Jamison Williams. But after the injury in the national championship game, I think I'd be surprised. But there's interesting value there when you look at what the odds are on these guys. Garrett Wilson's the favorite, but Jamison Williams and Drake London, they really do provide pretty good value if you did want to go a different direction there. And for me, I think I'm leaning Garrett Wilson. I know that's a little bit of the chalk answer, but I think Garrett Wilson's going to end up being the pick here.
And that brings us back to some quarterback props. How many quarterbacks will be drafted in the first round, over under 2.5? And who do you see being the third quarterback picked?
Yeah, I'm going to take the over here, and I think the team that gets us over the edge is the final pick, Detroit at 32. And supposedly there's been some steam with Sam Howell being the third quarterback taken off the board. I think a lot of people heading into this either had Desmond Ridder a little bit higher or even Matt Corral from Ole Miss a little bit higher. But the Detroit Lions were able to see Sam Howell at the Senior Bowl, and I think they really fell in love with him there. And when you're drafting a quarterback, I understand that they have, a pick at the top of the second round. So some might say, okay, maybe you take a better player at 32 and take the quarterback, in just a couple of picks later. But what's so valuable in the first round is those fifth-year options. So I think if you're able to use that on a quarterback, even if it's a reach by a few picks, I think it's more valuable for these teams to take that risk on the quarterback in the first round because of that fifth-year option. So my guess would be Sam Howell as quarterback 3 going to Detroit at 32.
Yeah, that's a good point on the fifth-year option. Then we're back a little bit to receivers. You talked about Jamison Williams and Drake London providing value, being the first receiver taken. Who do you see going first between the two if you had to pick one?
That's a really tough question because you can make the case for either one. I feel like in today's NFL, Jamison Williams is everything you want in a receiver. He's a deep threat. He's got that elite level speed. But Drake London, on the opposite side, he doesn't have that great speed, but he's a red zone threat, a really good jump ball threat. I think I'm leaning Jamison Williams. I know that's a little bit crazy because he's hurt and he's not going to be ready for the start of the year. But I think teams are going to fall in love with his big playmaking ability, with that speed that I mentioned, with that deep threat that I mentioned. I don't know if he goes all the way up to be the first receiver selected, but I think he goes a lot earlier than some people are anticipating. So I'll go Jamison Williams here.
In total wide receivers picked in the first round, we have over under 5.5. Over or under?
I'm going to take the over, but not by much. I think it comes in right at 6. I think you have the main 5 in no particular order of Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Drake London, Treylon Burks, and Chris Olave. And I think we see one more, whether that's like a Jahan Dotson or a George Pickens or maybe even Christian Watson. I'd be surprised if it got up to 7, but I think 6 is the sweet spot. So I'll take the over here at 5.5.
And will there be a running back select in the first round? I think a lot of people here are looking at Breece Hall potentially.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards no. I think really the only team you can make the case for is Buffalo at the back end of the draft, but I could see them going a couple of different directions. I know they invested a ton on the defensive line in years gone by, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them continue to do that. Maybe they want to go all out and add another wide receiver to the mix there, but for Breece Hall, who I think is the best running back in this class, I don't think we see him come off the board until the second round. I'd be pretty surprised if a running back goes in the first.
And then we're looking at conference totals. SEC, obviously the most dominant conference. Over, under 10.5 total players selected in the first round.
Yeah, I'm taking the over. I think last year was 12 from the SEC, and I think you'd have to go back to 2019, so 3 drafts ago now at this point, last time that it came under this mark. The SEC, they're just such a dominant conference, and you look at that Georgia defense, there's going to be a ton of guys from Georgia heading off the board early. Alabama has a ton of guys, whether it's Jamison Williams or Evan Neal. This is the best conference in college football for a reason, and I think we easily see double-digit players going. I think you get to 11 or 12 this year.
And then we got two more questions. Obviously, these are very correlated. Total defensive players drafted in the first round, 15.5. Total offensive players drafted in the first round, 16.5.
Yeah, so this is a tough one. Just trying to find where the value is on either of these picks because, as I mentioned, it's not really like a strong quarterback class. So I'm not so positive that it's going to be heavy on the offense, but I'm going to lean that it's more on the defensive side. So I'll take the over on the defense and the under on the offense. I think we see these teams lean slightly more on the defense. And when I look at this class, I think that there's a lot of value on the defensive line and edge rushers, and I think there's going to be a bunch of corners going, whether it's Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, but you have even more depth beyond that. So I'm leaning on the defense in this class. I think we're going to see, outside of the wide receiver position, which obviously I think pretty highly of, but I don't think we see a running back. I don't think we see a tight end, and I think there's only 3 quarterbacks going. So unless there's a massive run of offensive linemen, I think it's going to be more leaning on the defensive side of the ball in this draft.
Yeah, if you want to play it real conservative, you can just take over or under on both of them and guarantee yourself a W there, but that's no fun. Tiebreaker, here we go. Make sure everyone, I don't know why people forget to fill tiebreakers out, but fill out the tiebreaker. Total players drafted in the first round from the University of Georgia, closest without going over. Without going over is also key. Where do you peg this number at?
Yeah, this is another tough one. Trayvon Walker's obviously going to go pretty early, so there's one. You can make a case for both Davis and Wyatt going in the first round on that defensive line, so now you're up to 3. I think I'm gonna go 4. I think Nakobe Dean finds his way into the first round also. So I'm gonna say 4 Georgia Bulldogs come off the board here in round 1.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matt. So like I said, OddsChecker running their NFL draft props pool on playactionpools.com. Completely free to join. $500 total up for grabs. $350 to first, $100 to second, $50 to third. No reason not to join. Follow along. You'll see your standings be updated in real time. And go to OddsChecker. Check out all the content they have. If you're looking at placing some wagers on the NFL draft, OddsChecker is your place to go to find out the best place to get down on your particular bet. Like I said, follow Matt on Twitter, Matt O'Leary NY. Check out his Just Jets podcast. Matt, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for